Welcome to Brussels Forum 2020. We are pleased to introduce the Vice President for Foreign Policy at the German Marshall Fund, Dr. Ian Lesser.
Good morning and good afternoon from Brussels. Welcome back to Brussels Forum 2020, GMF's flagship event in its 15th edition this year. Let me at the outset say a word of thanks, as always, to our partners, to our founding partners, Daimler and the Belgian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to our forum partner, Deloitte, and to all our associate and supporting and knowledge partners. We're really very, very grateful. I hope you've been with us earlier for this month and for this week. We've had an extraordinary set of conversations around critical issues important to societies on both sides of the Atlantic. Yesterday, we had a very lively conversation with US Secretary of State, Michael Pompeo. Today, we're gonna shift gears somewhat and talk about what is happening at the local level, and in particular, the role of cities in strengthening democracy in very challenging times. And we have three mayors who've been very engaged in this area with us today. We're grateful to that, and we thank them for being with us. I'll let our moderator introduce them to you in a moment. Let me also just mention that this has been a consistent area of interest for GMF, for our civil society trusts, based in Belgrade and Bucharest, but also, Belgrade and Bucharest, but also for our offices in Warsaw and Berlin and Ankara. It's an area of strong interest for us, and in particular, of course, an area of strong interest for our GMF Cities program, run by my colleague in Washington, Stephen Bosacker, and his team. They're engaged on these questions every day, translating what GMF does to the local level. We're very pleased to have our moderator with us, Valerie Hopkins, Southeast Europe correspondent for the Financial Times. Valerie, thank you for doing this. And I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for having me in, and thank you all for joining what promises to be a really interesting panel with some Central Europe's young, most dynamic and most interesting mayors. As many in the audience watching will know and be alarmed by, according to Freedom House, 2019 marked the 14th consecutive year of democratic decline worldwide, and this tendency is particularly strong in Central Europe, which once was a sort of beacon of democratic growth. And I think it's great that we're joined today by the mayors of Budapest, Bratislava, and Prague, who are leading the fight against growing illiberalism in their national governments. At the end of 2019, these four leaders signed a pact of free cities, seeking to work with other cities and EU institutions to protect and promote common values of freedom, human dignity, democracy, equality, I'm quoting here, rule of law, social justice, tolerance, and cultural diversity. There have been many who suggest that this city-level opposition could be the key to defeating populism in the region. So I'm very thrilled that we are joined to talk more about this by the Honorable Zdenek Hrib, the mayor of Prague, the Honorable Gergely, the mayor of Budapest, who was elected last October, and the Honorable Matúš, the mayor of Bratislava. And I think I would like to just immediately start off with questions, but I will not abuse my position completely as moderator. I would like all those who are watching live to know that you can submit questions via Twitter with the hashtag Brussels Forum. You can also email brusselsforum@gmfus.org with questions, which will be fed to me by some of the wonderful assistants from the GMF. So without further ado, maybe I will start with Mayor Karácsony, since you are the most recently elected, and start to ask you, what is your city doing to strengthen democracy, and why have you decided to team up with the other mayors in Visegrad 4 countries and elsewhere in order to do that? Thank you.
Nagyon szépen köszönöm a lehetőséget, hogy egy ilyen
Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in such an important forum of such an important organization with such fine people as my fellow mayors. Very briefly summarizing Hungarian internal politics, it was approximately 10 years ago that we had a political turn in Hungary, which changed the liberal democracy after the political transformation using the emerging problems and creating a new constitutional setup, which the Prime Minister Viktor Orban also recognized and admitted that this is not identical to liberal democracy. In this system, all important political positions have been taken over by the party, the ruling party, and therefore there was a major change that in fall 2019 in Budapest, in half of the big cities, the voters elected opposition leaders. This actually resulted in a situation that in the Hungarian political setup, the only counterbalance to Fidesz and the ruling party, Viktor Orban, is the opposition leaders, mayors, but this event also returned the faith that it is indeed possible to make a change through elections in a democratic manner, even in these very difficult times and under these difficult conditions. The fact in itself that we returned faith and the belief that you can make changes in a democratic manner is an important advancement, an important achievement. And our politics and policy is about the fact that we are against the politics of the government that calls itself illiberal. We are not only advocating the values of liberal democracy, but we also add the values of participation democracy. Now, the fact whether cities can safeguard or sustain or save democracy, my answer to this question is yes, in my view, if they can bring more democracy, not only compared to liberal governments, but if they are capable of turning the population of a city into a community, and all the questions, all the issues they like to realize during the course of their politics, they always ask the people, they always seek the opinion of the people. They ask them whether the temporary bicycle lanes that were made during the course of the COVID pandemic should be retained, or what to do when a park is refurbished. Then people are asked where to place the benches, where to put pavements and sidewalks. As far as Hungarian democracy is concerned, I think this is very important because after the decline of democracy in Hungary in 2010, now this was the reason of the fact that democracy became very elitistic. And maybe in the late 90s, there was a good elite in Hungary because there were excellent and fine people leading the democratic change. But the values of liberal democracy were not made an experience for everyday people, not made an everyday experience for the population. Therefore, this was a disappointment for people, and a different type of change started. And this didn't necessarily start last October when I won the elections mayor of Budapest, but we have another anniversary, which is quite a strange coincidence, which is almost as important as my election October 13. So it was 1 year ago that we've had the first pre-election in Hungary when I became the joint nominee, the joint candidate of the opposition parties. There were almost 50,000 people of Budapest, and where I was competing against very fine other candidates. We just returned the belief and the faith of people that politics is not about politicians, politics is about people, is about the people. And we started to realize and implement the politics in a very systematic manner, which I still represent, that as opposed to people of power, it is not other people, but it is the power of people that has to prevail. And this is how we are creating strong communities in our cities. And I think this is not only an important message in Visegrad region and in Hungary, where the space of freedom is shrinking and where we have to retain democratic values. No, this is also about another model of governance, and that is the governance of participation-based democracy, which can be realized on a city level as well. This is returning to the value of the democracy of Athens, because it was there again where the policies, where the city-states were the ones that managed to make their politics prevail. I think that this is the new way of democracy, and should the cities be successful in this respect, and apparently these models which involve the people, the communities, seem to be successful, then we'll be able to realize and implement a new model of democracy throughout Europe.
Thank you so much, Mayor Karácsony, for your introductory remarks. I want to go to Mayor Vallo, actually. Your election in 2018 brought your progressive party to public notoriety, and just 1 year later, Zuzana Čaputová from your party became the president. What role did the fact that you had a leading role in the capital city play in that election, do you think?
I mean, that was quite, when I won elections, I ran as an independent, but with the support of Liberal Party, Progressive Slovakia, which was the party of today's president of Slovakia. It was maybe the first sign that, the first point is that was signed that on the municipal level, the politics in Slovakia are completely free from the party system. I didn't have any big party behind me, and I started to run as an independent, and after parties I like, two parties, liberal parties, join in and help me. And that was the first very important sign. But there was also the sign that something is changing and that people still want clearly values which are without discussion, we can call liberal or pro-democratic or pro-European Union. And I don't want to give me some names, but it definitely was the start of some kind of wave, let's call it.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your introductory questions. We go to Mayor Hrib now in Prague. You have taken some positions on foreign policy questions like that of China that are maybe unusual on such a national scale for a mayor. How do you see your role?
Well, I have to point out that, well, first of all, hello from Prague. I'm right now locked in the home quarantine due to the contact with COVID-19 positive person, namely my deputy mayor. So the whole city council is right now on a 14-day home prison. So, but the city is still running fine. It's not because it's without us. We run the city through the video conferences and over telephone. However, to your question, well, we're not actually doing on the foreign politics topics, in fact, here in Prague. The point is that we're just solving the issues connected somehow with the Prague city. For example, we wanted to negotiate our agreement, our sister city's agreement with the Beijing city. And yes, the way it turned out was simply because the Chinese side wants to put politics in every single thing, but that was not our intended output. So in the end, it ended with the cancellation of the sister cities agreement, and instead we had upgraded our relationship with the Taipei city to the sister cities relationship. However, this was something that was tightly connected with the city, as we had already criticized this sister city agreement with Beijing already in the year 2016 when it was signed. So it should be not very surprising that we wanted to correct this error of our predecessors as soon as we got to power in the city of Prague. However, yes, the thing is that the cities are getting more and more important in the contemporary world, and this is basically, as our colleague Mayor Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, pointed out, that the 19th century was the age of empires, the 20th century was the age of national states, and the 21st century is going to be the age of the cities, because the cities are natural silos of the innovations and natural silos of science, So it's very obvious that the importance of the cities will even grow in the future.
Just to follow up, Mir, have you, I mean, as the cities are becoming ever more important and as you're taking on stronger positions on even on international policies, have you felt pushback then from the national levels of government, and how has that manifested itself?
Well, of course, we are in a bit different political position, I mean, on the political scale, than our national governments. That's pretty much the same thing, or at least was up to recently, in all the cities in V4. However, this does not mean that we are not cooperating with our national governments. Of course, we do have these contacts. However, yes, sometimes the dialogue is very hard. However, the democracy is about dialogue. And yes, the problem is that, as Václav Havel pointed out, the democracy actually is somewhat tying up the hands of those who wish the best for the democracy, and actually it frees the hands of all those who think the opposite. However, I think in the end, the truth will win.
Thank you so much. Mayor Karácsony, I want to ask you a similar question. You know, as soon as you were elected in October, both you and Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán pledged to cooperate, to work together, you know, aware that it would be difficult to achieve your respective goals if you were started out fighting. However, very soon thereafter, you made a lot of statements that not a day has passed where there's not some obstacle or some problem. Can you talk a bit about the resistance that you faced since you were elected, and maybe with a particular focus on how that was manifest during the coronavirus pandemic? Thank you.
The Hungarian Prime Minister had an important sentence. Once he said that never say what I say, but what I do. So this phrase comes back to my mind all the time, because at the level of sentences and declarations, the government is very ready to collaborate with us. Deeds, however, speak differently. And especially after COVID has appeared in Hungary, there has been a change in Orbán's policies, and all the defense against the pandemic and all the economic problems appearing afterwards were used also to limit the possibilities and options of municipalities. And this applies especially to the functioning of the capital, the municipality of the capital city. In the past period, there was almost no day without any measure being taken that would make our functioning more difficult. And now we are reached a level that our municipality does not actually get support from the state, but is a net payer to the state budget. So we are actually taxed on our functioning, which brings our city in a very difficult situation, as we are also exposed to the very serious economic consequences of the pandemic. I also feel the very same way as the mayor of Prague and all of us. We all have the obligation to seek collaboration with national governments. And although I also believe that the government and municipal government is a very important level of EU policies, and I believe that the European Union also recognized the importance, how important allies the cities can become in order to achieve progressive goals like the fight against climate change, against social exclusion and the like. But
we are obliged to collaborate. And I believe that in the upcoming period, we can also show and we can restore the balance that we had for a couple of months after election between state and municipality.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Mayor Vallo, I want to come to you and ask, why is it and how is it that you all came together to form this Pact of Free Cities? What are the policy areas that you think you can together have the most impact, and who are the players that can be most helpful to you, I presume, in Brussels or elsewhere? Thanks.
I mean, of course, we are the smallest city from these 4 cities, and for us, it's very good to see these big brothers, to older brothers, in a better way, to see what they are doing, to have the information if we need. We are doing beautiful things with Prague, and for me, there are different levels of this cooperation. Of course, there are the political levels and economic levels, but also this level when we as a smaller city can achieve or be a recipient of a know-how from these other cities is very important. In line with, of course, in line with the protection and promotion of our jointly declared values, which is democracy and so on, the PAC idea or intention is to create a shared room from cooperation, and I believe that's what's happening. In the terms of exchange of good practice, as I mentioned it, experience and knowledge, especially in the most pressing and challenging issues the city had. And what is good in the cities, and I know it because I'm also part of different networks of the cities created by Bloomberg and so on, is that even if we are talking of different legal, for example, frames or whatever, the problems are always the same. The problems are always the same, and the solutions are always very, very similar. So that's just fantastic thing to be able to talk. And for example, if we are talking about Prague, it's like we are having this small project together. They're going to donate us their own bench, and we are going to use a bench from Prague, the design of Prague bench in Bratislava, which is fantastic also if we are talking about our past, which was a beautiful past together. But this is just a small thing, and after we go into Brussels, of course, and we are talking about how cities can achieve or receive more money and in which way. So I'm very happy that it's happening, and I think it's very important today.
Thank you so much. In that vein, I guess I can ask Mayor Hrib a question. The first question that comes from the audience from Lily Bayer of Politico, who wants to know how the mayors feel about the Commission's new proposal for the 1.1 trillion euro EU budget and the 750 billion euro recovery instrument. Sorry to settle you with this one, Mayor Hrib.
I'm not sure about the situation in other cities, but yes, we have just received the challenge for this REACT mechanism, and we're trying to find the projects that would possibly restart the economy of our city. Because the Prague has been hit particularly hard during coronavirus crisis. This is because the tourism is well developed in Prague, and we had roughly 8 or 9 millions of tourists incoming every year to Prague. Yes, the damage has been quite great. So we are looking forward to this help from the side of EU, and I believe we can offer the projects that will be really meaningful for the restart of the economy. However, of course, we do not just wait for the Europe to help us. We did run our local rescue programs already. For example, we just recently launched, the one for the support of the domestic tourism. But also we did already use some of the European money we had for innovations in our city, and we changed this support program for innovations into a rescue program called COVID Prague, for the rescue program to offer the money lease to those businesses in Prague, because, and there was another thing that happened during the coronavirus, the government somehow forgets on the businesses in Prague, so they prepare the rescue program for the whole country, except for the businesses in Prague. So we were merely correcting the errors of the national government. So I'm really looking forward to this initiative of European Union, and I believe that we are definitely able to find meaningful projects.
Thank you so much. I just want to encourage people to continue asking questions on Twitter via #BrusselsForum or over email, which is brusselsforum@gmfus.org. And that's because I've received a very good and interesting question from Matthew Janstedt, who is asking, and I guess I will address this to Mayor Karácsony, populist leaders have exploited divides between their core supporters in rural communities and so-called metropolitan elites in cities. How can mayors of cities build stronger relationships with their rural counterparts and reduce the hyperpolarization on which populism thrives? And I hope you other two mayors will also think of something good to say about this, because I think this is one of the most interesting topics in our discussion. Thanks. Mayor Karácsony.
Nagyon fontosnak gondolom, hogy a városok azok szövetségek.
I think it is very important that cities form alliances, and I'm really very delighted that the mayors of the Visegrad capitals, the Visegrad V4 cities, managed to launch this initiative, and we managed to extend the circle, which is actually an alliance of values and an alliance of interests at the same time, because I think it is also very important that, you know, as I mentioned, that the European Union would find allies in the cities. And this is why we started a lobbying activity, so that this would also be realized on the level of finances as fundings. Because there are a lot of number of projects that have been jointly developed by cities and jointly implemented by cities, which is again very much in line with the objectives of the European Union. We can also see that city governance, local governance, it can be a much more effective governance than other forms of governance. It is much easier to manage and to handle a lot of issues than on other levels. Therefore, the situation and position of cities throughout Europe is very similar, and we could say globally very similar. Now, this very this epidemic, this horrible epidemic, has ruined a lot of things that we had considered to be part of our everyday's life. And we quite often think that it would be good to get back to normal, to the old way of existence. But I rather agree with those who say that if we had to stop for come to a halt, because, you know, similarly to Prague and Budapest, again, this tourism suffered a lot. We had a very high level of tourism, but it also caused problems. There were tensions because local inhabitants felt that they are not at home in their own cities because of a lot of tourists. So when we relaunch the economy, when we relaunch tourism, we should try to find another river banks and not the same paths that we had carried, to be more climate conscious, to have new ways of regulating tourism, to have an opportunity to bring people closer to the decision-making levels. And in Hungary, and I think in the Visegrad region as well, where quite often we feel that our governments are going against European values. And let's not forget that there is a proceeding according to Article 7 against Hungary, the Hungarian government, which is the most serious procedure. So there is a political trap or a political pitfall where Hungarian voters or electors may feel that they are punished because of the politics of their government. So if the European Union reconsiders the mechanisms of funding and starts to directly fund regions or cities or associations and groups of cities or regions, and they could also be sort of candidates or beneficiaries of funding, then we can overcome this obstacle and we can relaunch the European economy in a more sustainable and a more just and a fairer manner that would more serve those noble values that are those of the European Union.
Thank you so much. And I mean, all of you have traveled together to lobby for this. I mean, do you find that member states are receptive and willing actually to give up some funding and power to cities? That's a follow-up for you, Mr. Mayor Karácsony.
Én úgy éreztem, hogy erre van fogadókészség.
I felt that there is a certain degree of receptiveness, but you know, the European Union and the institutional system is so complicated. It is a huge ship. It is difficult to turn the direction. You know, you just start to change the direction, and then it takes a lot of time before it realizes. But I think it already has started. Something has started. A lot of European cities have joined this initiative, and also big cities of net contributor states are also supporting this. So I see a fair chance to extend these fundings. We know that the European Union is a union of national states, of nation states, but these mechanisms could help a lot. And as far as Hungary is concerned, it would also be important that the next budgetary period of the European Union would follow the principle of partnership, which is there in all of the basic documents, and that the fundings and the projects would be made in such a way that cities could not be just disregarded. So I see that there is a fair chance to make a change in this respect.
Thank you so much. Mayor Vallo, I want to come back to you on this topic of the urban-rural populist divide as well, and what mayors of big cities can do to try to connect also, you know, in order to win at a national level, to replicate their success and their connection with people who live in less urban environments.
I mean, this is just very accurate question, and for me, it's very important. I believe the word of today, or word, the key word is together or unity. If we see what's happening in the States, also in Europe, that the walls are growing up, the communities are completely divided, the nationalities are divided, and this is also something which started on small levels in the city. We have of course, conservative liberal, that's the big division line in Slovakia. And still is, but we have people with dogs and people without dogs. We have cyclists and people who are driving cars, and we can go on. We have people from small cities, big cities, and I think that one of the main tasks of today, whatever, if we are talking about our national politics or municipal politics, is to bring people together. I definitely believe this, and as I'm coming more, even if from a liberal environment, but I'm without the party, I'm still independent. It's a little bit maybe easier for me. I can talk with like every group which has some political affiliations. And the question is what the mayors can do the only thing we can do is to do a great job. That's my opinion. If we are going to do a good job, people can see it doesn't matter, because in the city, everybody's living in the city. All these groups are just using the cities, and we need to provide a service. So for me, the best answer for this question is just doing a great job and not and doing it for everyone. So the matter of good run city and good service is more important than these division lines.
Thank you so much. Mayor Hrib, I have to come back to you with another question from a journalist again about the EU budget. And it comes from Katalin Halmai, a Hungarian journalist based in Brussels. Do you support the rule of law conditionality connected to the next MMF? And how do you think cities can profit from tightening the rules when it comes to rule of law?
Well, regarding the next framework, well, the Prague is a little bit complicated situation because in the previous years we had our own operational program for Prague, and therefore we were, for example, able to do a very flexible operations regarding these rescue programs using the European money in Prague. However, in the next multi-annual framework, we will not have this chance because the operational program for Prague will be cancelled. And as the city of Prague is considered one of the most developed regions in Europe, we will have some problems. However, there's another tool that the Europe is pushing in front, and that is this integrated territorial investments. That means in Prague that we have to discuss the joint development of our urban area together with our surrounding region, and that's the Central Bohemian region, which is on the map, it looks like a little bit of like a donut, because it's got a hole in the middle, and the hole is where the Prague is, as the Prague is also a region itself. But the Central Bohemian region, in fact, has got its seat in Prague, although the Prague is not a part of this region. So, and there is a certain necessity for the discussion between, in fact, the people from the big city and the people from other towns around the big city, which is leading me back to what just Matúš, Vallo, the mayor of Bratislava, just recently said, that it is about a certain overcoming of these barriers between these two groups of people, because there is always two groups of people. However, as there is an old joke saying that there are only two groups of the people. One group is dividing the people into two groups, and the other ones are not doing this. So this is about discussion with those other people on the development of this functional urban area, because of course the administrative border of Prague is actually just a line on the map. You cannot see it when you go there. There's no line on the ground, and the people, and it's actually 300,000 people who is coming every day to work in Prague, and they come usually from the Central Bohemia regions. So the next multi-annual framework is going to be about a lot of discussions.
Thank you so much. Mayor Karácsony, I would like to ask you the same question about conditionality connected to the MFF, but there's also another question for you, and also open to the others, about what new ways you have tried to expand the way that your citizens and members of your community can participate and become engaged in the governance process. And how are your cities working to become examples of successful integration and inclusion to build diverse communities at a time when xenophobia is also on the rise in Europe? Thanks. And in Central Europe in particular.
Éppen tegnap előtt az egyik politikai ellen.
Well, it was just yesterday that one of my political opponents said in the public radio that I am experimenting on humans in Budapest because the pandemic changed the community, the mass transportation of the city, and we started to make certain changes, smaller and bigger changes, which try to get the city out of this stalemate, stalemate which was caused by the previous years. And there's huge debate, and there is a discussion, because we would like to mitigate the traffic. We would like to enhance mass transportation. We have now more bus lanes, more bicycle lanes, and so forth. But in each and every topic, we open the opportunity of participation. We have a lot of projects in the city where people can express their views, their opinions, their stances, how they consider these changes, how they live through these changes. Because of the pandemic, we have to reconsider this, but we are also launching the institution of participation budget of participation. We have dedicated 1 billion forints in our budget, which is going to use an open source software, the Paris open source software, to seek the opinion of people about what to spend the budget on and what to realize from this budget, which is obviously now quite a limited part of the budget, but hopefully we'll be able to increase that in the upcoming years. Now, I'm very delighted, very glad that now Hungarian internal politics is no longer about the debates that my colleague from Prague mentioned, like who is dividing people and who are the ones who are not dividing the people and who are the ones who are betraying the country and who are traitors. But no, it's rather about things that are more meaningful. To have a bus lane or not, where we have constant traffic and congestion. Now, this is... We believe in this party, the ruling party believes in central democracy, where it's always the prime minister, it's always the leader who tells you what to do. He's the one who knows where to build a football stadium, where to put pavements, where to put sideways. He always have opinion on everything, which is then unquestionable. From that perspective, this is an experiment with humans. But we have like 30 to 35 pilot projects ongoing, which we created together with the local leaders and with local communities, and which are again about re-regulating traffic and transportation. I do love these types of debates and discussions. We can learn a lot. There's a lot of lessons learned as a result. And this also gives you a picture about how to operate Budapest in the next MMF, in the next framework, what projects to realize. We are going to ask people about that as well. The Hungarian government went to Brussels late last year about the operational programs for next year, which have no regional targets, so which would just cover the entire country instead of covering the regions. And I think this is just about leaving Budapest out from these development with these fundings. Of course, in Hungary, it's also true that Budapest is very much developed, maybe even more developed compared to the country relatively than Prague compared to its region. But if the economy of Budapest comes to a halt, that would make the whole economy, the national economy, suffer, that of the entire country. We would like to think in terms of a central Hungarian region as well. So we'd like to have joint projects with the central region, because the major problem here as well is that this division line, the boundaries of Budapest, between Budapest and the surrounding region, is not there in reality. It's physically not there. It's just a line on the map, as it was said. So, like you use your bus ticket, and then 10 meters further, you cannot use the same ticket because you're outside Budapest. Anyway, this is not an experiment in humans, but this is rather providing the city and the inhabitants an opportunity of reconsidering and rethinking their own habitat, their own city. And I think this pandemic was a good opportunity to make certain interventions and to seek the opinion of people. I very much agree with what Matúš Vallo mentioned, namely that while because look, a city is a lot of people in minority. Everyone is part of a certain minority from a certain extent, from a certain perspective. And how you can put these minorities together to form a majority, now that is the test, and that is the big issue. And it's very difficult. Look, I'm a mayor of a bicycle riding mayor, but I'm not against anyone. I'm not the enemy of anyone. And I don't like these types of simplifications when you divide people or based on one characteristic, because there are so many characteristics, and from a certain perspective, you are always a member of a certain minority. So it's only open and frank dialogue that can help you put this together in a consistent and coherent manner.
Thank you so much. I'm incredibly aware that we have only 10 minutes left and actually a lot of topics and a lot of interesting things to talk about. So I got a question for Mayor Vallo. So I'm going to ask you two questions at once. One is, what has changed for you over the city since the election of the current government? And how are you going to continue the fight against liberalism? And the second question is, and maybe I'll pose it to everyone or ask another one, how do you envision that COVID will change the daily life and management of the big city in the long term? Do you already see some long-term changes and challenges? And how do you think that could affect the role of the capitals in national politics?
Can I start with the second question?
Absolutely.
Because this is, of course, the very important question for us, all of us, in the last month. And I need to say that it's changing a lot. And maybe, of course, if we are talking about the cities on national level, our capital cities are always be the hot pot of the nation. Everybody needs to go to our cities because we have a government here, we have the most part of agencies, and we have, of course, the most works here. And what is, and it's going to be, in some way, it needs to stay in this way because it's just the capital city. What for me as a mayor is important, that something I was promoting a lot, and I'm still promoting, and I will be promoting, is what is going to happen with public space in our city. Imagine that you have a public space as the central skeleton of the city, something we are putting our money, our energy, and saying people, this is a safe and well-designed public space. You can be at home in this public space. And now we are saying, don't use this public space. You know, or don't, you can frequent it, but you need to social distancing, and this is I think this is a change which, if the COVID is not going to disappear, and is not going to disappear, will be pretty much affecting a lot of cities, not only because of their physicality, but also about how we are going to interact with people and how people are going to interact between themselves. Imagine that the public space is still the main living room of democracy. Even if the part of it is online today, it's very important, the physical presence. So this is a very important question for me, and we are taking care of it, and we are pouring our energy into understanding what we can do. And the first question, what happened, what we can do, I need to say that we had election in the end of February, and the opposition won in a big time. And even if it's a conservative government, the opposition won, which is a good news and good sign. And I hope the democracy will be more stronger. And this current party, it's openly and very firmly pro-democratic and pro-European, which is very important for me. And what it means for me in that time, that during the peak of the COVID crisis, we have a change in government. So I have the same meetings with different ministers about the same topics in 2 months. And for the cities in Bratislava, in Slovakia, and also for me, it meant that we had to step up. We had to take care of something government should take care during this crisis. We did a lot of communication jobs, to explaining, we are very in the first line when we are talking about the closing our schools. And I think Bratislava, together with all inhabitants of Slovakia and also with two governments, did a good job till now. Sorry, I ended with some kind of little bit spotlight on us, but we did a good job.
Thanks so much. Mayor Hrib, I'd like to ask you something similar. You know, what do you think is going to be the biggest change for you about how Prague is governed in the post-COVID era? And how do you think, are you worried that it will affect plans to intensify green policies?
Well, sure. Well, the coronavirus crisis was, of course, the biggest game changer that came up during our election term. Of course, at the very beginning of our election term, one of the biggest topics, actually, I believe it was actually the biggest topic, was, for example, affordable housing or the housing crisis. And one of the reasons of this was, in fact, the fact of these Airbnb and similar platforms, which changed the city center into distributed hotel. And also there was an economic conjuncture that caused the costs of housing going up. But these things are actually changed right in the middle. So the priorities of the city had to change as well, and also the solutions will have to change because there will be obviously an impact of on the taxes and on the income of the city. So, however, I prefer to look at all the crises as merely an opportunity. So, if you look what did the coronavirus brought us as an opportunity, and I have to say that this opportunity had very extreme costs. But if I would like to look at least at some positive aspects, I would say that it speeded up the digitalization process of the city hall, because it turned out that there is a lot of things that should and have to be done electronically over the network, and so to avoid these social contacts during if you want to do your things with the city hall. And the second thing is that it turned out that yes, the video conferencing is very much possible even on the city hall. You do not have to spend that much money these days on the offices, so we had to reassess our plans on building actually the new city hall. So that is one thing, and the second thing is the reassessment of our attitude towards the tourism, how to make it more sustainable for the city, because it's very obvious that there are some over tourism issues in the city that needs to be solved. And this was all sort of demasked by the coronavirus crisis. I believe we will be able to find a sort of more permanent solution that will, of course, not ruin the city, but it will address the precise problems in a more addressed way.
Thank you so much, Mayor Hrib. We have only 2 minutes, but I'm receiving a lot of questions, and I think I was maybe remiss to not ask a more broad question about the Alliance for Free Cities. You three, along with the mayor of Warsaw, who's unfortunately couldn't join us today due to the presidential campaign, formed this Alliance of Free Cities, but actually it's been now joined by a number of other mayors. So Mayor Karácsony, could you just give a very brief overview about who else has joined the Alliance, and how it's open, and how people who are mayors who are interested can get involved? Thank you.
Unfortunately, the COVID overrode our plan because we wanted to meet up in June in Warsaw, but sooner or later we'll get there. And we might be able by a future Polish president after the presidential elections, who knows? But actually, from London to Istanbul, we have lots of friends and allies, and in several European big cities and also Hungarian cities joined our pact. On top of all this, I believe that the COVID epidemic caused very similar problems to all the cities. So the solidarity existing between us might be strengthened by this epidemic, which is indeed a huge challenge to cities. I actually believe that, coming back to your original question, one of the biggest dilemmas cities face nowadays is what we have little of: public spaces. So there will be a huge political struggle, fight, what to use these spaces for, because everybody wants more of this, more terraces, or drive around safely in the cars. Even more mothers will complain of cars parking on the pavement, and the people and the parents of children suffering from asthma will want even more parks. So this will be a huge social conflict that cities will need to manage in a smart way. And I believe that this is one of the biggest conflicts of cities after the pandemic. But all big issues become easier if we have somebody who thinks alongside with us. In the past few weeks, I participated at dozens of video conferences and meetings. This helped us a lot in protection, and hopefully we can make use of these experiences in structuring our post-COVID life. So this is why I'm very happy about enlarging our Pact of Free Cities, and that we can share both our burdens and our knowledge.
On that note, thank you so much for your participation. This has been a really interesting discussion. I think there's so much more we could talk about, and there are so many great questions. Thank you very much to all the members of the audience who wrote in over email and Twitter with your questions. And thank you very much to the mayors and to the GMF for organizing this very interesting discussion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and have a nice day.
Thank you too, and hopefully you do not contract coronavirus. It's good you're staying in the quarantine. Have a good day. Thanks.